Capital Conference panel presentations. Today we will feature the early stage panel. And before we get started, I'd like to thank a couple of our key leaders and sponsors. Our silver sponsors include Penn Center for Innovation, Amitech, Ben Franklin Technology Partners, Osage Partners, G Squared, Pacific West Bank, and our bronze sponsors, BioAdvance, DLA Piper, and Susquehanna Growth Equity. Now, let me turn the program over to Pat Boyle and Paul Doherty, our conference co-chairs. Welcome, Pat. Welcome, Paul.
Hello, my name is Patrick Boyle, partner in charge of EisnerAmper's audit and assurance practice, as well as the technology practice in Pennsylvania. EisnerAmper is proud to support the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and this conference as an important touchstone each year. As we get started, I'd like to thank the industry track vice chairs for healthcare, Capilla Ratnam, partner of New Spring Capital, for technology, Glenn Bresner, co-founder and managing partner of Activate Venture Partners, and for early stage, Doc Parghi, managing partner of SRI Capital. We are building on the momentum from yesterday's great technology panel, and today we are taking on early stage companies. Now, I would like to introduce the final sponsor, Morgan Lewis, and partner Doug Kingston. Thank you.
My name is Doug Kingston, and I'm a partner in the Emerging Business and Technology Practice Group at Morgan Lewis. Morgan Lewis is a proud sponsor of the early stage panel. The moderator for our panel is Doc Parghi, managing partner, SRI Capital. Our panel today will be discussing remote working from the VC perspective. We are pleased to have a panel that includes representatives of East Coast and West Coast VC firms. They will be discussing remote working trends, what they like and they don't like, and related anecdotes from their portfolio companies. With that introduction, I'll turn it over to Doc Parghi of SRI Capital.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for having us. I'm Doc Parghi, managing partner at Sri Capital. Sri Capital is an early stage venture firm focused on funding innovative startups, typically in the enterprise SaaS and deep tech space. And we're really pioneers and have been doing it since 2012. We're usually the first institutional investor in the company, and we like to lead or co-invest in typically the pre-Series A round in the $1 to $3 million range for a meaningful stake. But it's not about me. What an honor it is to have such esteemed panelists. We'll be discussing remote work from the VC perspective, East Coast and West Coast, and what are the trends, what you like, don't like, and some fun anecdotes from their portfolio. So joining us today are Paul Martino, who is the general partner at Bullpen Capital. We also have Tripp Jones joining us from the West Coast, who is the general partner at August Capital. And then Gill, Beyda, who is the managing director at Comcast Ventures and the founding partner at Genacast. And last but not least, we have Varsha Tagare, who is the managing director at Qualcomm Ventures. So such an esteemed group of panelists, and I'd love to have them introduce themselves, and starting with you, Varsha.
Oh, okay. No problem. Hi, thanks for getting this together, Doc, and what a wonderful way to spend this afternoon rather than being on mundane calls all day long. So I look forward to this conversation. I'm Varsha Tagare. I am Managing Director at Qualcomm Ventures. We are a balance sheet fund for Qualcomm. We invest in 7 geographies around the world. We've been in existence, I think, for more than 15 plus years with about $1 billion under management. We are super excited about mobility. And so we invest in areas that are related to 5G, IoT, auto, AI, as well as enterprise companies. We come in from Series A to Series C. Our rough sweet spot tends to be around $5 million of investment per round per company. So very excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Varsha. Next, we'll turn it to Gill.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Doc. I'm Gill Beyda, partner at Comcast Ventures. We're the venture arm of Comcast and NBC Universal. We're financially focused, so companies we invest in don't have to have any connection with the mothership, but if there's that opportunity, we can open those doors and try to make stuff happen there. We're across a broad variety of verticals, consumer and enterprise. I'm on the enterprise side, and we'll write the early stage $500,000 check to the $10 or $20 million Vader check.
Great, thanks. Tripp, we'll turn it to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Doc. My name is Tripp Jones. I'm a general partner at August Capital. I've been at August about a decade. August is a long-standing Silicon Valley early-stage venture capital fund. We're in our 11th fund, a $450 million Series A primarily fund. Some of our earliest hits were companies like Microsoft and Sun and Seagate, and more recently, we're the earliest investors in companies like Splunk and Bill.com and Fastly and kind of most recently GitLab. Excited to be here and share what I've seen over the last few years.
Wow, what a portfolio. Paul, last but not least, we'll turn it to you.
Bullpen Capital focuses on what we call the post-seed stage, that gap that happens after Doc invests at the seed, but before you're really ready to go see Tripp over for your Series A. We identified this gap 10 years ago. We knew it would be a big problem as we went from 20 or 30 micro funds to now over 1,000. And so we do this very specialized product for a company that needs, call it another $3, $4, $5 million before they're ready to go get the now larger Series A, because a lot of the Series A funds are bigger. Our fund's a fourth fund, and we're almost ready for our fifth fund, all sitting around about $130 million, $140 million. Doc, thanks for having me.
Great, thank you, Paul, and what a panel. So next, I'd like I'd like each of our panelists really to give their perspectives on remote work, and I think you'll see some varying views, not just from a coastal perspective, but kind of from the specific mandate. So look forward to hearing that, and then we'll get started. So Varsha, let's start with you and your perspective on enterprising of the home, and I stole that from Qualcomm Ventures.
I love that line, by the way.
Thank you. As we all started working from home, we said now home is the enterprise. So we called it enterprising of the home. So one of our investments that we are now currently live on is Zoom. And Zoom has been an anchor for enabling work from home. I think it's something that has really changed our lives. In addition to Zoom, of course, we have Microsoft Teams and we have other products as well in the market. But we think that has been a great way to still stay connected with each other instead of doing audio calls. So the remote workforce for us implies not just the ability to securely do your work, but have fun and connect with people, the collaboration part of the work. So we talk a lot about the IT building blocks required to ensure you're secure since you're now outside of the enterprise. And then we talk about some of the tools and technologies that you require to be productive as a group. A large group at some times. I mean, I think these tiles will fill up with just a couple more people added to this, and think about large engineering groups that would be 20 to 100 people. So have an ability to work together. So I think that's the way we look at it, Doc. And I'll pause here unless you want me to give some more details on our thinking behind this.
No, that's great. That's great. And we'll drill down a bit. I want to get to Gill. I know you have some interesting perspectives that you're thinking about, so I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll hit some of the high level, and then happy to dive a little bit deeper throughout the conversation. So I look at the remote work from sort of three different angles. One is the enterprise angle, the actual employees or the workers angle, and then also from the economic point of view. And the economy. So from an enterprise point of view, I think the high-level bullet points are legacy organizations were forced to accept remote work. They went kicking and screaming, but most of them found out that they can do it, and they can do it effectively. As Varsha mentioned, there are a lot of IT challenges, namely connectivity, and also, securing a perimeter that now is, thousands of miles long. And then also, I think I'd love to maybe go a little bit deeper later on in the conversation around how do you innovate when you have a remote workforce that is loosely coupled with not a lot of ability to, for collaboration. So that's high level on the enterprise. On the employee side, a lot of employees, at least in the shorter term, the last few months have described it as being as or more effective than being the office, which I think is interesting. I think that we're also seeing some challenges on the work-life balance, that there is very little now separation between, the home and work. And, one of my partners was just noting the other day that, my gosh, like normally I'd go into the office and I'd be able to bang out 9 hours and it was amazing. And now I can't do 9 hours, work from home. And the reason was because when you're 9 hours in the office, you're doing a lot of things. You're going out for coffee or for lunch, you're meeting people in the office, and all. Now he's just sitting in front of his computer for 9 hours, right? So there's something has to change there. Also on the employer labor front, remote now is anywhere. We're probably going to be in this, various levels of shutdown for at least another 6 months or maybe a year. And it's giving, the signaling is now that we need to pace for a marathon, not for a sprint. And there may be some lifestyle changes. Somebody may want to work from the Bahamas or what have you. And then, I think an interesting thing is I think we've seen the wonderful days of working from home, but in the Northeast, winter is coming, literally and figuratively. The Game of Thrones reference, and that our bubble is going to shrink dramatically. And then finally on the economy side, this is the ultimate for labor mobility. Part of the reasons why the EU was formed was to drop barriers, allow for economic and labor mobility. If the labor doesn't actually have to physically move in order to be mobile, it's the ultimate in efficiency and optimization around meeting supply and demand for labor. There's now an abundance of labor, unfortunately, because of a lot of unemployment. We have marketplaces that have been stood up, a la Uber, TaskRabbit, things like that. I think we're going to see a lot more fractionalizing of labor, where instead of you spending 8 hours a day working for one employer, it may be smaller increments servicing many different employers. And then finally, we could spend the whole time speaking about secular challenges around some businesses may never come back, like real estate, restaurants, travel. And so there may be significant impacts there. So I spoke a lot. Happy to take a deeper dive into some of those spaces, but I'll hand it over.
No, that's perfect. Thanks, Gill. That's, I think, a perfect segue into kind of your point of view, Tripp, based on our discussion yesterday. So I'd love to get your view on remote and take it from there.
Yeah, I think Gill summarized it really, really well and comprehensively. I'll maybe dive in to kind of a little bit more of my practical experiences, because I'm currently on 10 boards, and which means I'm on the board of 10 fully remote companies right now. And prior to March, none of them were. And I'm proud to say, and I'm sure everyone on this panel and everyone in this audience, is in the same boat of, we've all successfully done it. Are there bumps along the road? Absolutely. Have we gained some productivity where we thought we wouldn't? Yeah, we have, and it's exciting. The tools that Varsha helped fund, like Zoom, are kind of holding us all together, and we're doing stuff that I don't think we could have done 10 or 20 years ago. So that's exciting. The question I'm having, over and over and over again with the company that I work with is, what's next? We've proven we can do remote work. Is that the right answer? And we know we can work from the office. We've done that for, I don't know, since they've been offices, hundreds and hundreds of years. We now know we can work remotely. And I think the question we're having is, what's right for each individual company? And I think it starts at the top, and it's a big cultural, strategic question for all these companies. And that's the one that I really am wrestling with right now, because I don't think there's a right answer. I think it matters on that founder, that CEO, that management team's desire of what best for their company. I think Some will continue to work remotely. Is it 10%, 20%? I have no clue. But that might be directionally correct. Some will happily go back to the office. And that will work well for folks too. And I think people will have a greater appreciation for a time around the not the proverbial, but actual water cooler. The one question I have is, can a hybrid solution work? Because I think a lot of people are trying to make that work, and I'm not sure. And that's one that we can get into later, because that's one that is unproven in my mind. But it's certainly on top of everyone's head right now. So it's going to be the next 6 months in some way, as we have a little bit more choice in the way we work. It's going to be the really interesting times. I'll give it back to you, Doc.
Excellent. Thanks, Tripp. And Paul, I'd love to hear your views.
Yeah, let me give a couple really practical perspectives. Seeing pitches, remote pitches, working with companies that were set up remote in the past. So I would say about half the decks I've seen over the last 2 or 3 months have a slide on remote work, the company's philosophy, how they think about it, what their policies are. I had only ever seen that slide a couple times previously in my life, and actually one of those companies is a portfolio company called Octane AI, 100% virtual company. They had 15 employees in 12 different states. And I called the CEO when this happened. I said, you need to tell all of our companies what you're doing, because you've been doing this. You set your company up for this. And it's been great to see the kind of leadership that we got out of Matt, the CEO, because he was able to tell all of our companies, this works and that doesn't. Another perspective is we have a lot of companies not in the major 3 cities, LA, San Francisco, and New York. About 30-40% of our deals are in Edinburgh, Scotland, or Orlando, or Cincinnati. And I cannot tell you how great their C-level searches have gone now that people are happy to work for a company in Orlando or Cincinnati. The absolute best searches I've been involved in have happened over the last 4 months.
Wow.
We've been able to attract a talent pool that previously would have never considered working for these companies. And so companies that were thinking about, oh my God, I don't want to go do a C-level search. I'm like, no, please go do that. Now, obviously it disadvantages San Francisco, where it was easier to have everybody come in because there's such a talent pool, but it's kind of definitely evened out the geography, as Gill made a reference to in his opening comments.
Fantastic. Thanks. No, it's very, very interesting view that you have, Paul. So Varsha, I want to start with this, right? Because the audience is going to be interested in Zoom, of course. Qualcomm Ventures led the Series A. I believe still has an active role on the board. Obviously, what you invested in then and what they are now are vastly different. So I just like a bit of kind of your insights on, the Zoom of yesterday versus the Zoom of today, and how they've adapted and really managed that explosion in popularity.
Yeah, Eric is something, isn't he? But if you had done this investment 10 years ago, I don't think you would have predicted the outcome of what it is. So let's go back 10 years ago. I think we quoted Eric for about 7 months, saw his product at every milestone, and saw him delivering or really pushing the boundaries of each deadline. So if you think about WebEx and the big guys, the WebEx, the Hangouts out there at that time, and now here's a new startup. So I think it took us some time to get there, to get to know Eric. What we really liked about him at that time were 2 things. One was product insight, and we were able to validate that internally from the experts at Qualcomm, that he was really building a product which was far superior in multimedia communication. And the other thing where it really shined was ability to work across networks, across devices. So WebEx, etc., was built in the time of PCs. And now you had explosion of devices, feature phones and smartphones, 2G and 3G and 4G and different kinds of codecs. So the product superiority was really interesting. The other part was really focus on customers. I don't know if you've seen Eric, and this has not changed about Eric, Doc, from the beginning to the end. He says, your happiness is my happiness. And so very strong focus on customers, really laser focus on customers. So I don't think that has changed at all for him. So the bet 10 years ago was on a new product that would change the way we collaborate on these new devices and new networks that are coming in. I don't think we would have seen how far it got from there, but it started to get really strong adoption around the world, especially in other geographies where you didn't have strong PC penetration. So I think you see now a product from early days where it was not as supported across devices to a product that's supported across devices, across networks, across many different platforms. The customer focus of Eric hasn't changed. So I think that's something. And also if you see, the culture of the company hasn't changed. So your happiness is my happiness. It also resonates around the employees. I think that hasn't changed at all for Eric. All the employees there are super happy. He has very high, Glassdoor rating, etc. But it's really the culture of the company, both for customers and employees. And I think that has not changed at all. We've had growing pains, like I'm sure you've had with other companies. When you expect many people to come in and join the platforms, you always have challenges. And Eric has maneuvered through those challenges over the last few years. So we are thankful for that. And we are thankful for all of you guys using the product and helping to make it better.
Great, thank you. That's it's an amazing, it's been an amazing journey, I'm sure. So next I want to go to, we hear about this remote, the remote workforce, the future of work, enterprising of the home. But then, recently in the last few months, Google took significantly more space in San Jose. I think Amazon took 1,000 or 2,000 seats in the East Bay. Of course, Facebook signed a mega lease in New York City. So this seems counterintuitive from what we're hearing. So how do you, what's your view on this, Gill?
So first off, I have a feeling that those projects were in the works long before this all happened here, and it probably had some momentum, maybe some commitments associated with them. It's less in line with what they've been saying, which is that they're taking the rest of this year and probably much of next year from remote. So I wouldn't read too much into it. But as I mentioned in my opening comments, I have a theory. It's not backed by any data, but we'll soon see whether it plays out. In that, I think that companies will have a challenge innovating in this loosely connected environment here. I think if you have a business and everybody knows what they need to do, that business, that machine can work centrally or it can work remotely. Everybody has their marching orders, and they're just replicating their work from day to day. I think if you're asking an organization to iterate on its culture, to be more innovative, to come up with new products, to brainstorm, to be creative, I think it's very difficult to be creative in a bubble, in isolation. I think you need to get people together in the same place in order to be able to brainstorm and come up with these ideas. Now, somebody could say, oh, well, if I have an idea, I'll just set up a Zoom meeting with a bunch of folks and then we'll get together and we'll have a chat. Yeah, you can do that, but not all the best ideas are worthy of getting an hour, half an hour of everybody's time. Sometimes you're just walking by somebody's office and you just pop in and you say, hey, I've had this idea about this, and then it takes on a life of its own. If you have to set a meeting time to coordinate with other folks in an organization, the idea will automatically get filtered. It has to rise to a certain level, and it will be filtered and curated before you actually reach out to other people. And already, if you begin curating the ideas even before you've had an opportunity to share it, I'm not sure that we have the most fertile ground to grow some of these ideas. But it's just a theory.
Perspective on that, by the way. So as some of you might know, I made a film a year ago called Inside Game. I'm wearing the shirt here. But my screenwriter is now a screenwriter on a television show called FBI. And he was telling me that the Zoom fatigue in the writer's room is unlike anything that us in tech experience. Now think about that use case, right? We all complain about that long board meeting, they're actually trying to figure out the script for a creative show. It was just eye-opening to speak to him on something which you hit on, which is a creative process, and how draining and physically tiring it is to try and recreate the writer's room on Zoom. And so I do think there's some huge area of potential new kind of collaboration in these more creative realms that we just haven't figured out with the current tools that are available. And yes, we can complain about board meetings, but I can picture how much harder his task is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Board meetings are not super creative. I know. I sit in them all day.
That's a great segue. So Tripp, I think you and I discussed a company that you have, which is almost all remote. And so I'd love to get kind of your view of this. And you mentioned hybrid, and it seems on the surface that hybrid would be an approach that could solve everything, that solve some of the issues, and you get the best of both worlds. But I think you have a pretty strong view that that it will be difficult to achieve, especially relative to one of your companies. So
yeah,
I'll leave that to you.
I'll be happy to jump into that. And just going back to Gill and Paul, I totally agree with you guys. Someone needs to create like a whiteboarding product. It just doesn't exist. I feel like we've invented a lot of the products, but that is one product that I feel like we just haven't figured out. Anyway, back to your question, Doc. Yeah. So it's so much my perspective on remote work it has been influenced by one of our portfolio companies, GitLab. And GitLab is a company I got to know kind of before it went through YC back in early 2015, where it was 5 folks. The CEO lived in San Francisco, but from day one it was a fully distributed team. Even 5 folks, they never got in the same office. The headquarters was the CEO's apartment in like the outer Mission in San Francisco. And from day one, it's been remote. And since then, in the last 5 years, it's gone from 5 people to over 1,300, working in 65 countries, I think now, around the world, obviously. And it's always been fully remote. The CEO, Sid Sijbrandij, sorry, he's from Northern Europe, and I butcher his last name often. And is very, very focused and disciplined about his culture from day one. And he's kind of set up a set of rules, which I probably over-index towards, but it makes sense for this company, and I think many others that view remote work as a strategic advantage. The way they go about it, because you don't get those kind of moments of serendipity and that spontaneous chatter, and even just the knowledge transfer that a newer employee learns from kind of running into or overhearing from older employees. They're adamant about documenting everything. Everything needs to be written down. There's just, and then there's systematic communication on kind of all their policies, all that they know. They kind of have a universal repository following that all. And then even when they were smaller, they were also very focused on creating, kind of creating those moments of spontaneity where twice a week they'd have an hour where everyone in the company, back when it was dozens and hundreds of people, would sit around a Zoom call and kind of chat about their lives, but they weren't allowed to talk about work. And it really was a way to share a story about your partner, share a story about your kids, share a story about what you're passionate about outside of work. And that was really good for them. They're now too big. They can't do it. But even still today, even with all 1,300 in a post-COVID world, they get together as a company once a year, spend a week together. And you really, I do think that allows them to really strengthen those bonds that I think a lot of us share from being in an office with folks day in, day out. And frankly, I think we're probably all missing. And it's allowed them to scale incredibly fast. They've 1,300 employees in 5 years, and the majority of them are developers. And it wasn't because it was some sort of cost arbitrage. It wasn't so they didn't have to pay leases. It was their whole goal from the very beginning was, I want to find the best developers for this product in the world. And I want to be able to, work with them the day I find them, which has been exciting. They do, and to your second point, Doc, they've been very thoughtful about this, and they believe strongly that hybrid doesn't work. If the C-suite and a special chosen few were headquartered in San Francisco, they really feel strongly and worry that would create an us versus them, insider versus outsider dynamic. And so even though the CEO and CRO live a couple miles away from each other, they don't work together. It doesn't work.
Wow.
If anyone's been in a meeting, in a board meeting where there's 4 people in a conference room and 3 people on Zoom, that's an awful experience to be one of those 3 people on Zoom. And I think that kind of shows you don't want to be outside the room. You can't communicate effectively when everyone's behind their screen. That works well. Look at us right now. It works fine. So that I've learned a ton from them, and it's definitely influenced me. They have a great handbook that they've made. It's an open source oriented company. They're dogmatic about protecting that open source culture. So they put a guide to remote work handbook on GitLab.com, and anyone that's curious, it's worth a read. It's pretty comprehensive.
Excellent, thank you. Varsha, so do you have a view in terms of hybrid and versus fully remote? I think you and I are very comfortable with the remote model, and kind of our legacy. We grew up in that world, so we're very comfortable with it. So I'd love to kind of echo on it, follow up on Tripp's view.
It's a very interesting world. I was reflecting on what Tripp said, and I can use some of his tips now from this company. Some of our companies are based in India and US. And so, we had to figure out a way to work, not just virtually, but culturally. If you think about 10 years back, when the global movement was not that strong. And so you have to mesh culturally, you have to mesh virtually. And at that time, we used methods, one of our companies called Mindtickle, and they came up with this idea of workation. And workation was a week off, but not a week off of work, but a week where you work at a completely remote location with your family. So you work the working hours, and the evenings are packed with family activities. And that was such a big draw of camaraderie between the employees, and the families felt part of this company where the employees worked many, many hours a day. So I said, okay, this is where you hang out. All right, these people are okay to commit our lives for. And I think that is now missing as we come into this complete Zoom world. So one of Tripp's ideas of perhaps converting the workations to a way of doing it on Zoom, a way for people to hang out is something really important. I do feel that the water cooler conversations, the creativity does get somewhat stifled. This spontaneous creativity, me just walking across to my colleague, hey, what do you think? Now I have to find a time on his calendar, book that. That itself is a task. And by then you've lost the spontaneity of it all. So if there's a way to at least have some hybrid time that you do meet, and perhaps it's less often than it was before, but I think that's really required. One, to continue to build the bond. Otherwise, I think we'll become robots. I'm sorry to use that word, but we'll lose the emotional connect with our employer as well as our teammates, and we'll also lose the spontaneous connectivity. So I do believe we need some sort of hybridness to keep that, really strong human connection and the creativity juice going.
Oh, interesting. Great. So I wanted to spend a bit of time on some of the trends and things that you like, what you're seeing, what you're investing in. Now, look, none of us here are looking to find the next Zoom, the next Slack. That ship has sailed. All right, so we'll forget about kind of collaborative tools. But yeah, indeed, indeed. But just in terms of what is it, kind of what's that next? What's next, right? I'd love to get a view from everyone, kind of what they're seeing, what they like, what the perspective is. So, Paul, we'll start with you in terms of that.
I'm the wrong guy to start with, Doc. As you know, our fund is anti-thematic, so we don't play the game that way. We let our entrepreneurs come into our office and educate us about markets no one else is interested in. So I defer to the panel on what's next.
Okay, great. Gill, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, we're a little bit like that, Paul, in that we're across such a broad cross section of sectors, but I'm generally in enterprise B2B. I'll talk about the last few investments that I've made on the enterprise side. So one is a company in the quantum computing space. So I think this transcends COVID. It transcends a lot of different a lot of different sectors. We think that it's transformational. We'll still have our classical computers, but this is sort of the next generation of computing. It's still a few years off, but we think it'll impact many different industries, including, as an example, pharmaceutical and drug discovery. If we had quantum today, it may have helped us come up with vaccine sooner. We're also spending a lot of time in AI machine learning. We believe that that's transformational as well. I invested in a company called Neural Magic, which allows for machine learning algorithms to run on CPUs instead of GPUs, saving them time and money and what have you. We think that by liberating these models and being able to run them on commodity CPUs, that it allows them a lot more flexibility. So we're also looking at other areas of AI, data security and privacy. I've made investments in cybersecurity. So the COVID world hasn't really changed the areas that I'm looking at. I do ask one more question in these meetings, which is, how has COVID impacted your business? With a lot of enterprise B2B companies, it's delayed traction, but it hasn't eliminated traction. So a lot of my portfolio companies that are engaged with enterprises, whether it's on data privacy or cybersecurity or AI/ML, the projects are still important, but they may be pushed out a quarter or two. So we still see there's a lot of opportunity out there. It's unfortunate, obviously, that the economy has turned for the worse. But I think that on the early stage investment side, it's encouraging to see entrepreneurs still out there. Instead of turning their boat for safe harbor, they're out there with high seas and waves and really passionate about what they're doing. And I think it speaks a lot for entrepreneurs who are out there building companies, especially during times like this. And hats off to them, and I respect them, and we'll invest in them.
Great, thanks. So Tripp, what excites you as that kind of the next phase of remote? Sitting out in the valley, you must be seeing all the big ideas.
Yeah, well, first off, I appreciate Paul's perspective, and I agree with him. But for the sake of the discussion, I did kind of noodle on this a bit, and it just, if we just go narrow on kind of what's changed, and assuming that a big percentage of the population is going to work remotely for the next 100 years, for the foreseeable future, I do think there are probably are some opportunities. In a lot of ways, we've really kind of nailed a bunch of the products that we use, I think, in the last 10 years. The Zooms, kind of to enable this, all the kind of the Git repositories to code together, all of the, even just Google Docs, Notion, Airtable to collaborate on different projects for folks. It's all there, with notwithstanding my request for a product to be able to whiteboard together. That would be nice. Where I think there is an opportunity is kind of probably a little bit less sexy, but just is important. It's around the services that all these new remote workers will require. As all of our portfolio companies kind of, their employees start going out into the world and work wherever they want to, it creates some complexity. If you're in the U.S., all of a sudden you have different insurance policies. If your employees are not in one city and one state, but 30 or 40 different states. And some services like JustWorks are starting to kind of help that. But what about, folks that are going international, GitLab, 65 different countries. And I think there's a real need there because, when you're an employee working in Germany, an employee working in Costa Rica, an employee working in the Maldives, an employee working wherever on a boat in the middle of the Pacific, there's different rules. And how do you how do you service payroll? How do you provide insurance? Are you sure you're paying, are you sure on top of all your tax compliance? And so there are some companies like remote.com that Two Sigma funded, Deal that Andreessen recently funded and Spark might have just funded. Those are doing interesting stuff where they're providing, it's more of they're more services companies, but I think they're valuable enough and frankly, kind of charge enough to be big, interesting companies. So that's what I kind of, as it relates to this conversation, I think that's what might be pretty interesting.
Fantastic. Varsha, do you have some thoughts?
I think now that all of us are working from home, everybody's complaining about bandwidth. It's never enough. It was a lot before. Now I'm struggling. I have to change my port throughout the day because all my neighbors are on. So I think it's time to upgrade our infrastructure. And I'm sure Comcast is looking at this as well. And so we think it's the right time for the next generation of 5G networks to come in. So we are quite excited about that. We think it'll level set the bandwidth across all people around the world. And that's an area we're heavily investing in 5G, in the operator, in the infrastructure, as well as tools and technology to make it better. So we recently did a very large investment in India, an operator called Gill, which is transforming itself into a platforms company. So that's an example where really start from the guts, start from the infrastructure. Another one is called Affirm Networks, which is again 5G networks. Now it's part of Microsoft, but again, build out the entire pipe all the way to home. So I think that's one area. The second one is, well, you got a new pipe, now you got to secure the new pipe, right? So deals around security, and I think all my colleagues here probably have investments in that area, but we have invested in companies like SentinelOne, as well as Cloudflare, which is now public. So really try and secure that cloud. The third part where we are investing in is taking technology to routine places, which didn't enjoy technology before. You and I did, but look at the factories. The doctors were never automated. This COVID downturn has forced them. I mean, there's no option. I was very surprised to do 2 video consults with my pediatrician and my physician. Never done them in my life before in the US. And they were very transparent, very easy. And I was really happy to see those. And those actually reduce cost of going to the doctor or reduce infection. So we are investing, TytoCare is a deal we did in that space. And US has many deals. I think they all are Livingo and others, they're doing phenomenally well. So I think bringing technology to other industries that were left behind is another thesis. And I'll comment one last one, which is on industrials. Right, industrials and telecom are old industries. So one of our companies called Zenier, it's helping with field service management. Very boring task, right? When you have a problem at home, somebody comes, a contractor who doesn't know, who's not connected with the headquarters. Well, Gill is smiling. I'm sure Comcast has the same issues. Has no idea. You got to call 3 different places to figure out where your work order is. So Zenier is making sure that entire field service management is streamlined, and then using endpoint predictive analytics, they can say, okay, these are your weak points in the infrastructure right now. So we think old industries that were left behind will get picked up. So those are some of the themes that we are trying to pursue at Qualcomm.
Fantastic. Thanks. So Paul, I'll turn it to you. Are there specific verticals that you see as kind of really taking off from here? I know we spoke briefly about education as an obvious one, but just kind of wanted to get your view.
Well, definitely the one that we have a lot of exposure to is in the esports category. Anything esports related right now has a level of attention that it's never had before, with everything like real athletics being shut down in the fall and potentially the spring. We're in a great company called GameFlip, which does all sorts of products servicing the esports category. They're launching a whole new set of services that we could have never imagined pre-COVID. So this is a category we're very excited about, have a lot of exposure to. I'm also involved in a company called Paper that sells one-on-one tutoring services to K through 12 K through 12 companies. It's called Paper out of Montreal, and it augments what happens in the classroom. And so to this hybrid question we had before, I think this company is on the right track for trying to figure out how to do hybrid, especially in the context of learning, where K through 12 is going to have in-person interaction at some point again in the future. So those are two categories I'm excited about.
Excellent, excellent. So what I'd love to do, I think this has been very insightful, very interesting. What I'd love to do is, I think we're at the 5-minute warning. I'd love for each of you just to tell just a good anecdote about a portfolio company. We've talked about several of the companies already, but kind of going beyond the Zooms or the Git. I just want each of you to have a good anecdote about a portfolio company. So Gil, I'll start with you.
Gill, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I had some kids in the background. I was trying to shield you all from a comment. So I have a really interesting company that we invested in last year in the corporate event space. And so they would allow you, they had a marketplace, single interface where you can book a Star Wars Cinco de Mayo, or you can have a piglet petting zoo in the office, or a terrarium building, or a cheese pairing and all. Amazing entrepreneur, Lee Rubin. She's just absolutely brilliant, and loved her business, her go-to-market. That COVID hit, and that business was out of business overnight. Nobody was doing in-office events. She and her team, amazingly, within a week or two, completely re-architected the business into virtual events. And they're doing gangbusters now. So if anybody's interested, the URL is withconfetti.com, withconfetti.com. And you can go there and you can plan a pizza party for 50 of your remote employees, and pizzas will magically appear at all of their houses. You can do a wine tasting with real wine that appears in everybody's, in everybody's homes. Family feud competitions between teams, escape rooms, and the company is doing amazingly because companies are looking for ways to engage their employees, to keep that culture, and also keep them happy. And folks, unfortunately, we've seen it in our organization, are tired of having like another video conference happy hour, right? With nothing to do and just chat about your day or your week. So that's just a fun story about a company that made a 180-degree shift and is doing quite well.
Fantastic pivot. Paul, any fun,
here's
fun
my favorite story, and this is the humbling one because it shows you how hard our business is. So I'm sure you all did your triage when COVID hit, right? COVID hit. Who's in trouble? Who's going to be fine, etc. So at the top of our list is a company out of New York called Bento Box. Bento Box sells software to not restaurants, but like single restaurants, small restaurants, not like to the big ones. So this is a company that's been doing great in our portfolio for the last 2-3 years. Of course, she's going to be in big trouble. So, we get on the phone with Crystal, the CEO. What are you doing? How can we help? She's like, look, all my customers need to be able to do curbside delivery. Let me go do that. So at the end of the second quarter, she blew past the projections without a modification. Right? She's one of these examples where it's like, for sure she's in trouble. And sure enough, she beats the projection without modification, because sometimes you got to play the game.
Wow, fantastic. Varsha, a quick anecdote about one of your companies?
Yeah, I'll just give a quick one. I think in one of our emerging markets in Latin America, we thought they were a little bit behind on online shopping, etc. But they are seeing a similar phenomena like Shopify now. So one of our companies, Numi Shop, has really pivoted to ensuring online commerce for all the companies, small businesses in the region, and enabling you and I to shop. And so now we are seeing this phenomena pick up not just in the US, but all around the world. So that's what I would say. They've enabled remote shopping for small businesses in Latin.
Oh, wonderful. And Tripp, last but not least, I'll hand it to you.
I'll try to go quick. COVID obviously, hit a number of our companies, I'm sure all of ours, negatively, but it also, hit several with the lucky stick. You couldn't have predicted it; it just happened. And I actually have a predominantly consumer portfolio, and a number of them kind of really have seen a boost. But the one that kind of stands out above the rest is I'm an early investor in a company called HipCamp. HipCamp is a marketplace for folks to rent private land, to camping, to put a teepee up, put a yurt up, put a little lodge up, and let people come and get outside, outdoor recreation. And this company was doing quite well before COVID, but we're kind of blasting through 2022 numbers this summer. Just given that one of the safest things you can do is get away from folks, get out of the city, and go enjoy nature. And it's amazing how much has changed folks' behavior in a very, very short amount of time. And I'm hoping for, frankly, obviously for personal reasons, but also for societal, like folks will fall in love with the outdoors and continue to enjoy it, even after this, all goes away one day.
Tripp, I give thumbs up for that company. I've used their experiences and they're phenomenal. Good. And they're very accessible in the Bay Area, and it's really nice. So I encourage all of you to try them.
Thank you.
Well, that was amazing, and I can't believe that we're reaching the end of this panel. The time has flown by. We could have talked about this topic for twice as long. So thank you, everybody. It was amazing and insightful, and I look forward to hearing about all and everyone's future successes. Thanks again, and Doug, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you to our esteemed panelists and moderator for an engaging session. We invite everyone to tune into the next broadcast episodes to see the featured company presentations and the Lion's Den finale. But now, join our panelists at an informal networking session for 30 minutes.
Thank you for participating in today's panel and networking sessions. We are really excited for our next virtual programming, which is happening on August 25th, 26th, and 27th. This is the first in a series of our featured company presentations. These are the same companies that will be considered for our Lion's Den program, the grand finale, on September 24th. Don't miss them. Again, next week, August 25th, 26th, and 27th. On your screen now, you'll find a QR code to access the virtual networking room powered by Remo. Please use this QR code to enter the networking now. We look forward to seeing you there.